Hey, how's it going? My name is Wes. Welcome back to another lesson. This is lesson 9 already, and today we have another purple lesson, which is a grammar lesson. In today's lesson, we are going to go over subject pronouns, a very important topic to discuss about the Spanish language. Alright, so today's lesson, subject pronouns. Now, before we dive deep into this lesson, I want you to grab your notebook or a pencil and a paper, and I want you to draw a copy of this table that you see right here. It's 8 rows and 2 columns. The left side of the table you can leave blank for now, and you can copy the text that's being displayed on the right side of this table. Alright, so pause the video right now, copy this table, and then once you're ready, press play again. Alright, so now that you have a copy of the table that I just showed you, let's get into the subject pronouns. Now, first of all, what are subject pronouns? If I would simply have to describe to you what subject pronouns are, they are pretty much ways or words that we use to describe people. So in English, we say I, you, he, she, it, we. Those are the subject pronouns that we use in English. Now in Spanish, of course, we have different subject pronouns. And in today's lesson, I want to go over these different subject pronouns so that we can add these to your vocabulary and so that you can make these yours and start using them to create sentences. Alright, so without further ado, let's start with the first subject pronoun, which is the word I in English, which in Spanish is
yo. Yo.
So as always, I highly recommend you to also repeat the words out loud because it will help you learn the words. Right, so I is yo. Now because Spanish is spoken in so many countries, sometimes you might also hear different variation of yo. So not yo, but more yo, with almost like a D in front of it. Or sometimes you might hear sho, like a sh sound in front of yo. So yo, sho, it really depends on what country you live in, what country you're traveling in. Honestly, it doesn't really matter which accent you use. What I recommend is taking over the accent that is being spoken around you. So if you move to Spain, use the Spanish accent. If you move to Colombia, use the Colombian accent, and so on. Alright, so now that we have this first subject pronoun, we can add it to our list. So in the first row on the left, we can write yo. So yo is the Spanish version of I.
Yo. Yo.
Alright, so once you're ready, let's move on to the second subject pronoun, which is you. In Spanish, this is
tú. Tú.
And notice the accent on the you here.
Tú.
Now this tú is informal, so we only use this when we are talking to friends or people that we know. So again, let's grab our list and let's write tú in the second row.
Tú. Tú.
Alright, so then another way of saying you, in English we use you to speak to friends, but also to speak to someone who's, for example, very old. In Spanish we have two different words for this. So we use tú for informal situations, but if we want to speak to people that we respect or that are older than us, we use the word usted.
Usted. Usted.
So this is you, formal, and singular, so only one person. Alright, so let's add that to our list. Now, I made a little drawing here of an older person with a stick. Again, at the description of this lesson, you can also find a PDF file on my website, which you can download, which also has everything that we go over today. So if you're not really good at writing like me, you got a PDF at the end of this lesson also. Alright, so yo, tú, usted. Let's move on to él, which is he in Spanish.
Él. Él.
Again, here we have the accent on the E. It's very important to write the accent because él without the accent actually means something different. Alright, and then she is ella.
Ella. Ella.
Again, the double L, I know I've been saying this for so many times, but double L is the y sound, not ella, ella. She, ella, he, él. And as you can see, for the English word it, there is actually no subject pronoun. And that is because, as we learned before, everything in Spanish is either masculine or feminine. So there is not really a word for it because it doesn't exist. Now, for the word it itself, there is actually a word, but it's not a subject pronoun. So for now, I'm going to leave this out of here to avoid confusion. So for now, we can just write él and ella. So él for he and ella for she.
él, él, ella, ella.
All right, once you're ready again, let's move on to the next subject pronoun, which is we. Now, as I just said, in Spanish there is masculine and feminine. And when we say we can also use two different words to say we. So let's look at the first word. So the first word is
nosotros, nosotros.
And nosotros ends with os. And we use this either when we are talking about us, so we as a masculine group, or as a mixed group, so masculine and feminine people. And if we talk about only females, so if I would be a female and I would say we, and I would refer to only females, I would say nosotras with as at the end. So nosotros or nosotras.
Nosotras, nosotras.
Again, us non-native speakers are not used to using masculine or feminine, so in the beginning it might be a bit difficult to know which one to use. But as you move on with the Spanish language, you will get used to it. And actually, often in most cases, you use nosotros because it's used for masculine and mixed groups. But it's also important for you to know that if you are all feminine, that you use nosotras. Alright, so let's also write these down in our tables. Again, you can use these nice illustrations that I've got, or you can just download the PDF that I'll provide. And then if you're ready, let's move on to the next subject pronoun, which is you. Now in English, we have many yous. We have you to say you as like one person. We have you to say you formal or informal. And we have you to say you guys, or even you formal if it's multiple people. So there's many yous in English. Now in Spanish, these different yous all have their own words. So the you that we are looking at right now, which is vosotros, is the you that we use to refer to a group of people, either all masculine or a mixed group. And this is an informal way of saying you. So more like you guys, for example, or you if it's friends or people that you know.
Vosotros, vosotros.
And what's also very important to mention is that vosotros is usually only used in Spain or the islands of Spain. So if you're learning Spanish because, for example, you want to move to a Latin American country, then you should not use vosotros, but you should use another word, and we'll go over that in just a second. Alright, so vosotros, if we talk about masculine or mixed groups, and then you probably already guessed it, vosotras, if you're referring to a group of women or girls. Vosotras.
Vosotras. Vosotras.
Alright, so let's also add these to our list. Now, in the list you can see that at you see informal plural. I'm not sure if I already explained this, but plural pretty much means that there's multiple of something. So singular is just one, plural means multiple. So when I say you singular, I mean you one person. When I say you plural, I mean you multiple people. Alright, so then the next subject pronoun, which is ustedes. Now, ustedes can actually mean two different things depending on in which country you're in. Ustedes in Spain means you, multiple people, in a formal situation. So you would use this, for example, if you were talking to an elderly person. You would say ustedes. However, as I just said, in countries that are not Spain itself, for example, in Latin America, ustedes can also be used to say you informal, both for masculine and feminine groups. So this is a pretty important decision that you should make right now. Do you want to learn the Spanish from Spain, or do you want to learn the Spanish from Latin America? So depending on which country you are in, ustedes can mean either you informal or you formal. And it's up to you to decide which one you want to use. I would recommend to use the ones that are being used in the place that you go to. So for example, me, I moved to Spain, so I took ustedes as you formal. But if you would move to Latin America, I would suggest using ustedes as a way of saying you guys.
Ustedes. Ustedes.
Right, so let's write these down in our table as well. And then if you're ready, let's move on to the last subject pronoun that we will learn. So the last subject pronoun is ellos.
Ellos. Ellos.
And this means they in Spanish. So ellos, they, either masculine or mixed groups. And of course for feminine groups, so groups with only females or girls, we use, as you probably guessed, ellas. So ellos or ellas.
ellas, ellas,
So actually, if you paid attention, then you can see that these are pretty similar to él and ella, which meant he and she. But it's the plural version of he and she. So él becomes ellos and ella becomes ellas. Alright, so let's also write these down on our table, and now we actually have our full table. Now the table that you see here is actually the subject pronouns as they are used in Spain. And in the next slide, which I will go to in just a couple seconds, you can pause the video right here if you want to. So in this slide you see how the subject pronouns are being used in Latin America. So as you can see, vosotros does not exist in Latin America. It exists, but they didn't use it, so I left it out. So again, use whichever one works best for you, either the subject pronouns as they are used in Spain or the subject pronouns as they are used in Latin America. And one more thing that's good to know is that even if you would use the subject pronouns as they are used in Spain, but you would speak to someone who speaks the Spanish from Latin America, then you would still be able to understand each other. But they would definitely be able to pick up that you have a different accent. Alright, so that's it with the subject pronouns. Now before you move on to the next lesson, I recommend you to review the words that we just learned and already start recognizing them a little bit, maybe even learn them by heart. Because as we continue with this course, you will see these subject pronouns many more times. So it's important to mesmerize them before we move on. Alright, so that's it for this lesson. Again, you can find a PDF of today's lesson with these tables also included on my website, SpanishWithWes.com. If you have any questions about today's lesson, make sure to leave a comment down below. Again, as always, I hope that this lesson was helpful. I hope that it was easy to understand. And of course, I hope to see you in the next lesson, which is actually our first yellow lesson, which is an introduction to verbs. Alright, that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Adios.